Welcome back, everybody. Make sure we got this going correctly. Yes, all right. Well, we are in 2 Kings chapter 5, end of 4. We have one last thing in chapter 4, and then into chapter. We're purifying the deadly stew. Yes. Yes. All right. So this is a time when famines have been coming and going and things, and Elisha just raised the Shunammite woman's son, and who was sort of born miraculously to her. You know, she had been barren, and then Elisha promised a son to her, and she did. And so now, verse 38, Elisha came again to Gilgal when there was a famine in the land. And as the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, he said to his servant, "Set on the large pot and boil stew for the sons of the prophets. Go make dinner." And one of them went out to the field to gather herbs, and he found a wild vine and gathered from it in its lap of wild gourds, and came and cut them up into the pot of stew, not knowing what they were.
Oh, good.
You gotta keep track of your culinary horticology. And they poured out some of the stew for the men to eat. But while they were eating of the stew, they cried out, "Oh, man of God, there is death in the pot." So oftentimes poisonous plants and things like that will be extremely bitter.
So it didn't even taste good.
So yeah, when they tasted it, it tasted extremely bitter. They were like, "No, something's wrong." It doesn't seem like anybody died, from eating it like immediately, and even most food poisons don't react quite that fast. But they could tell, there's death in the pot, and they could not eat it. And he said, "Bring flour." All right, it was just too thin. And he threw it in the pot and said, "Pour some out for the men that they may eat." And there was no harm in the pot. So he purified it. Not that the flour, again, had any magical, this is not, you can't put poisonous things in a pot and add a little flour to it and it'll be fine again. But by the power of God and his prophet, God preserved the men, the sons of the prophets.
In that region, what kind of flour would it be?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some sort of gourd, so there was a fruit, like a hard-skinned fruit that was of it.
But the flour that they used, would that be wheat or corn?
Oh. Well, the flour would have been either barley or wheat. Yeah, they grow both barley and wheat in that region. Rye, possibly. No, not corn for sure. Corn hadn't been domesticated, except in Mexico and North America at that point. The note here says, fruits from a cucumber-like vine thought to be the colocynth, Colocynth. Although used for medicinal purposes, they can prove fatal if eaten in large quantities. So the gourd-like thing, whatever Hebrew word that is, connects to this colocynth. 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 So there you go.
And my note says it was simply, the flour itself did not make the stew edible. It was simply a means by which the Lord provided for those who were faithful to the covenant.
There you go.
There's something.
Oh.
These quarters. We call them watermelons.
Does look like a watermelon.
Yeah, it does. Or the seedless.
Well, they said corn.
Those little ones that they
It's kind of stored
Yeah,
down.
Yeah.
you see, it carries $12 more.
Yes. Well, see, I might be poisonous, so don't mind.
Yeah. Throw some flour.
Yeah.
Oh, the insides look almost like a pomegranate.
Yeah.
Something's crushed. Wow.
And the fruit is smooth and an extremely bitter taste. Hot. interesting. There you go. They grow in desert plain. Desert area.
Pretty big
Used in
seed,
traditional medicine.
5 millimeters.
As a laxative, diuretic, or for insect bites.
Oh,
You prefer the insect bugs.
You get the insect to eat it.
that's totally.
What does it say under the culinary part? I mean,
Yeah, the seeds, which must be separated from the pulp and heated to be made edible, have been used since antiquity as a food source in the Sahara and Sahel, where crops frequently fail and farming is impossible. So they grow like a weed, basically. The enigmatic early Egyptian ceramic found in the desert may have been ovens for roasting them, so they have to be kind of roasted to be edible. Separated from the pulp. So it seems like maybe the seeds are what's the edible part.
It's surprising you can eat the seeds, but not the,
In West Africa, some confusion exists between this species and watermelon. The seeds may be used in much the same way. In particular, the name ugusi may refer to either or both plants in their capacity as a seed crop or to a popular soup made from the seeds. The seed flour is rich in micronutrients and therefore used in food formulations in regions such as West Africa. Flowers can be eaten, and stem tips are sources of water. Oil from the seeds can be used for soap, which explains why if you eat too much of it, becoming a strong diuretic or some sort of inflammatory thing. Yeah. So there you go. Curious.
really a useful plant, really.
Yeah, it really is. It reminded me, looking at it, of these little eggplant kind of things you would eat in Liberia, but those had lots of very tiny seeds, so that's definitely not the same one. Kind of that striped outer, but they're also very tiny. Tomato size. All right. So a man came from Baal Shalishah, bringing the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain in his sack. And Elisha said, "Give to the men that they may eat." But the servant said, "How can I set this before 100 men?" So he repeated, "Give them to the men and they may eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat and have some left." So he set it before them, and when they ate, had some left according to the word of the Lord. What does that sound like?
Loaves and the fish.
The loaves and the feeding of the 5,000. So he brought the man of the first fruits. So it was truly an offering of gratitude to God during at the end of the famine, where things had actually grown again, and there was enough for the sons of the prophets, and there was some left over.
I've got the King James Version,
Yeah.
and it says the 20 loaves of barley and first fruits, or 20 loaves of barley, and they mentioned ears of corn in the husks.
Yeah, that's going to be a bad translation, I think.
I didn't have corn, huh?
They had Mexicans there.
They're everywhere, they're everywhere.
They came from Mexico.
How?
Well, they call it the fresh ears of green.
Yeah, but the ears of the
Fresh
the-
ears.
first the blade and then the ear, the wheat. The wheat is,
looks
yeah.
like
It would have been, yeah. It would certainly not have been a reference to corn. They certainly didn't have corn at that time. So to translate that, even in whatever the King James was, 1620, did they have corn? Did it have been brought in 1492? Columbus sailed the ocean blue, brought back corn for me and you. I don't know.
Dream man.
The King James has been revised a number of times since its first publishing, so I'm just not sure how corn slipped in there. It's very curious. It might be a Latin. I have to look at the Latin word that Jerome translated it to, that King James came from out of the Latin as well. But yeah, definitely not corn on the cob like we're
What
thinking of.
could it be?
It's a corn in the
It'd be-
husks.
It'd be ears of wheat,
Oh.
the wheat
Like the
tips.
heads.
Yeah, the heads of the wheat, so.
But I've never heard of the wheat being like ears. It's corn. You've always heard of corn explained that way.
Yeah, it's being ears more in terms of corn, but
It said ears of corn in the husks.
yeah. Yeah, likely heads of wheat, which could be parched or ground into flour, so, yeah.
Never know.
That's
Yep.
what the internet says.
Yeah, so certainly not in terms of what we think of as corn. We're not that far removed from it where it would have been like a lost plant of some kind either. So I have a feeling they know what the word was, but I think it's a King James translation issue there, which we have a number of times, like Moses having horns. Yeah, there's a bad translation from the Vulgate that when Moses came down from the mountain, instead of his face glowing, it was translated that he had horns. And so if you look at some statues of Moses, like Michelangelo did one, he got horns.
Didn't know that one.
Yeah, it's strange. So
What would have been the symbolism of horns?
it's a mistranslation of the word for glowing. He had rays, he beamed, and it was sort of like, things sticking out of his head. Yeah, those are horns, right? Jerome sometimes translated late at night. When you're about to doze off, you just sort of like, I guess it is.
A little bit too much.
Too much need.
Yeah, I suppose so. All right, chapter 5, one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament. We have Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria. Was a great man with his master in high favor, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. So a couple things we know about Naaman already. He is a Gentile. He's from Syria. He is not an Israelite. He is high in position. He's commander of the army of the king of Syria. He's great. And why was he so great and in high favor? Because through him, what? The Lord had given him victories for Syria. Isn't that interesting? So the Lord is using Naaman for God's purposes to strengthen Syria, and because that was God's plan. And so Naaman was God's sort of unwitting instrument, and that God used him to gain victories for Syria. But what is Naaman's problem? Yeah, he has leprosy. So some sort of, it's a very general word for skin affliction. We talked about this a little bit maybe back in Leviticus and things, that just various skin conditions, but they were fatal. Not Hansen's disease that we think of as leprosy now with the leper colonies and things like that, but some sort of skin affliction that was contagious and likely fatal. So he was sort of a dead man walking in that respect. For all these great accomplishments of earthly valor, he was not stronger than disease, because disease is disease. Sometimes no matter how hard we strive, we can't overcome these things. So he was a mighty man of valor. Remember, we heard about David's mighty men that he would gather around him, these commandos and things like that. He was very brave, tough, hard-nosed guys. That's Naaman. He is not a wuss. He is a fighting man.
But I like the rest of the story.
Yeah. So now the Syrians, on one of their raids, had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel. And she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. So now we have a captured little girl from Israel. And she said to her mistress, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." What great faith in that little girl. I love teaching this to the confirmation kids because it's like, look, you have this little girl who is a slave girl serving in his wife's household, and on her staff. And even though she's been carried off, she still trusts that, you know what? You know who could help him? Yahweh. God's prophet in Samaria, he would be able to help your husband. Isn't that great faith? It's tremendous faith. And her confession of that faith sets the whole thing in motion. That she points Naaman through his wife, points him to the prophet, to Yahweh, for healing and deliverance, through whom God had already been blessing Naaman, but Naaman wasn't cognizant of that. He wasn't a worshiper of Yahweh by any stretch. I mean, they had their pagan gods and things like that, pantheistic sort of things. We'll hear about that in the future here, where Naaman's going to talk about how he has to go in with the king to a pagan temple, but we'll get to that later. But this little girl just, she continues steadfast in her faith. And one commentator said, it's amazing that she says that she wishes he would go to the prophet in Samaria to be healed. It's amazing that she doesn't say, I wish I was before the prophet in Samaria because I wouldn't be here. Or, I'm glad he's not before the prophet in Samaria because I'm a slave here and you're going to rot away and die. Because I'm mad at you. But no, she doesn't return evil for evil. She says, I think you could help him. You should go trust in the Lord. Amazing. Just a great little confession of faith from a little girl. And so I tell the confirmation kids this too, and to encourage us as well. It's like, we seem, what could my meager confession of faith, who am I but one to, what difference could I make? And this little girl sets it in motion. God uses her in a mighty way. It's really tremendous. Like the little boy who brings up the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and God uses that for a great blessing for the 5,000 plus. So pretty cool. I like that story.
What would her age be about?
I would say teenager. Yeah, I mean, the little girl is certainly not infant, and she's in the service of her master, so, teenage age, a young maiden kind of age. Yeah, not married yet, so, 10 to 15, somewhere in there. So, and it's a funny, I always think that's a funny phrase, oh, would that my Lord, would, to begin, like, if only. I just think that's a funny archaic way of saying that. If only, would that.
But they
We
must
don't
have,
talk about that. We don't talk like that anymore. I mean, it's not in
they
conversation.
must have been treating her okay, or else she probably wouldn't have wanted to help them.
Well, the other amazing thing is, they listened to her. I mean, who would listen to this slave girl who worships this foreign god? It's like, what does she know? What do we care what she says? But in the end, they're sort of like, I don't know, what do we got to lose?
We tried everything else.
Yeah. Naaman doesn't particularly care for how God will heal him of his leprosy. We'll get to that shortly, but they do listen to him. So Naaman went in and told his lord, so he tells the king, thus and spoke the girl from the land of Israel. It's a good way to sum everything up. Like, thus and so said the girl from the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. But where was Naaman supposed to go? Well, to Samaria, which is in Israel. So, but
Not to the king.
not to the king.
To the
No.
prophet?
He's supposed to go to the prophet.
Right.
But at the same time, you're about to send your chief general into a foreign land. You should probably let the king know that this is a peaceful enclave. This is not an invasion. We're just, business or pleasure, medicinal.
He's on vacation.
Yeah. But there is some problems with him going to the king of Israel. So Syria sends a letter to Israel, and so he went. And what does he take with him? 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Well, why bring those?
They'll be there a while.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're about to go ask for a miracle. You should probably expect to
Pay for it.
pay for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
They always say, if you want to get a fortune in Israel, take a large fortune with you.
I suppose that could be the case. So, yeah, Naaman does not understand how the true God works. That God's miracles don't come at payment. We don't charge for God's means of grace. But that's, from his standpoint, that would be what's expected. Quid pro quo. I'm going to ask you for something. I'm not going to come to you empty-handed. I'm going to come to you with some sort of a gift. So, and that's a lot.
That is a lot.
So he brought the letter to the king of Israel and read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman, my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy." And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and make alive, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Only consider and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me." The poor king is like, somebody shows up here and they're like, "Here is my chief general, cure his cancer."
Yeah.
Like, and if we don't, which I can't, you're going to say, "Hey, you didn't cure my guy. You killed him. Now we have pretense to come in and go to war." That's his concern. He's like, "I'm not picking a fight." He's like, "You came to me, and there's nothing I can do about this. What's going on?" So he tears his clothes and lament over this and things. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come now to me, that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." So let him come to me, and we will show him that God has a man in Israel, and God is the true God. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots. Imagine big motorcade. This guy's a big shot. Armored car with the gold and silver in it. And they stood at the door of Elisha's house, and Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying,
Oh my God.
"Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." Seems like a pretty simple instruction. But Naaman was angry
He's a big shot.
and went away, saying, "Behold, I thought that he would surely come out to me, stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the place, and cure the leper. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. What is he upset about? What has him upset so far?
But Elijah didn't come out to
He
him.
didn't
So
get
there's the
worse
first
than
part.
all of them.
Elisha did not come out to him. Elisha sent his messenger. Naaman has not even met Elisha yet. They have not met each other face to face. So Naaman is upset. He's like, "Surely I thought he would come out and stand before me." It's like, does he know who I am, that he sends an errand boy
Right.
to come give me this message?
No.
So there's his first, pride that he has puffed himself up to say, "I know better. I'm more important than to be treated like this."
Now see, Elijah didn't get any of these gifts. The gifts went to the king.
No. They haven't exchanged any gifts yet. No, he's still got his gifts. Now he gave him the letter. He gave the king the letter.
Gave the gifts to the king.
No. We're going to find out about the gifts. The gifts play in later on. So that's the first issue. Is pride says, he needs to come out to me. I'm standing here before his house, and he sends me his messenger. Now, what is he upset about the message?
He doesn't want to have to do anything. He just wants a quick wave and it's done.
he had in his mind how this was supposed to work. That, don't you say some magic words, dance around, wave your hands over the thing. Isn't that how this works? But you're asking me to go wash in these rivers?
He's looking for a flourish.
Yeah, he wants something extraordinary and magical and extravagant because, he's a big shot. He wants it to be a big production, make a big deal out of it. So it doesn't go the way that he expects that it should go. He's like, this is how I want it to look.
Plus,
That's not.
Jordan's not a nice river.
All right, so now the rivers themselves, and he does not like the Jordan River concept either, because the Jordan River is kind of a muddy, shallow area, it's not a nice river per se. I mean, up in that area there, it's not so contaminated per se. I mean, around Jerusalem and stuff like that area, it's kind of an open sewer in a lot of ways. I mean, it's bad, but so he is right in saying, aren't the rivers up north where I'm from, don't we have better rivers up there that I can wash in? If you want me to wash, I'm going to wash here and I'm going to get more diseases. What was his mistake there? And thinking.
And he's doubting, he's not believing.
All right, so he's doubting God's word. What is he hung up on? I mean, he says, I've got rivers better at home to wash in. What is he hung up on? The water.
Yeah.
He's hung up on the washing. As though somehow this washing or the water, it's like, oh, I've got leprosy. All I had to do was take a bath. Why didn't I think of that? Well, obviously it's not washing in water that cures leprosy. So, but he's hung up on, shouldn't I go into a nice river to get this done? And you're asking me to go down into a river that certainly shouldn't make anything cleaner than it does. This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense to his pride, to his paganness, to any of these things. It doesn't make any sense to him. It's like, let me just pay you, make a big deal out of me, and cure me so I can go home. Maybe a couple of flashes in the sky, you got any smoke things, something,
Fireworks.
make it great. But, he rejected the means by which God told him that he would be healed. He rejected the messenger, and he rejected the message and the means. That plays into a larger picture of how God works, which we'll say in a minute. That God sends messengers with a message and a means by which to heal and save us, and we, in our sinfulness, often reject that. People bristle at the means by which God chooses to save us. What do you mean water in the Word? What do you mean bread and wine and the Word of God is the Lord's Supper? That's crazy. It's like, don't we have better don't we have better words, and don't we have better ceremonies that we can do to make church more exciting, or make forgiveness a little more of a flourish? But no, you bring us to water and word and bread and wine, and then God Himself doesn't even speak to us from a cloud with thunder. He sends messengers. They reject the messengers. How often people reject the preachers of the word, or even as we share the word with them, they reject the messenger and the message and the means by which God has clearly said, this is how I save. It's here. It's free. So I think this is definitely is emblematic of how God works through messengers and message and means, and how sinful nature will reject those things and want to do God's things their way, as opposed to just receiving how God says to do things. You see that? I think that plays very much out in why we have denominational breaks and just rejection of the message and the messenger, the whole concept there.
As I think about my visits on evangelism, I think you hit on a word there, pride.
Pride is a huge part of it.
Because when we talk to people, it would be, they felt like they can do something. I need to do good works.
Yeah.
I need to do this. And instead of looking to Christ, who did all the works.
Yeah.
And that sounds like the same thing with Naaman, you know. He
Yeah,
wanted it done his way.
And they're also very big on telling you what they don't have to do. Like, you know, they may talk about what they want to do or things, but they also are very big on saying what they don't have to do. I don't have to go to church to be a Christian.
Yes.
Well, of all the things that you could do in your doings that you want to do, the doing of coming and receiving the gifts that God gives should certainly be on that list, you know, at least. But that's the rejection of the message and the messenger and the means by which God works. You know, where does He give His gifts? His word and sacraments and things. There's a difference between rejecting the gathering of coming and receiving God's gifts and it not being available. I think those are different things. And actually, you're going to see Naaman deal with that when he goes back home to Syria. He's going to go back believing in the true God, but he's also going to realize that he's alone in that. And so he's going to have some issues going home, and that he's going to talk about with the prophet. It comes up later on. There's a difference between those things. So don't be like, you know, oh, somebody's on a desert island, they don't have a church building, so they're going to hell, right? It's like, it's totally not the point. So, all right, so he's mad about the messenger and the means and all these things.
And he hasn't talked to Elisha yet.
He has not met Elijah face to face yet. Elisha has sent Gehazi, his servant, out to meet him, but not Elisha himself. And Elisha will meet him later on. So he's all upset about this. He went away in a rage, had a little temper tantrum. But his servants came near and said to him, "My father, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you." So even though the servant brought the word, whose word was it? So the servants at least recognized that the servant was sent by the prophet, so it's the prophet's word. We would take that a step further and know that, well, Gehazi is to Elisha as Elisha is to the Lord. And so Gehazi's word is the prophet's word, and the prophet's word is the word of the Lord. You know, thus says the Lord. So we can do that. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? We can do that syllogism. But so they recognize, look, even though his messenger came out, we know that this is the prophet's word. And these are guys who Naaman had sent on errands before with his authority, that when they would show up and give the message, they would expect the person receiving it to think it was their master's word. I mean, they get that. So has he actually said to you, wash and be clean? I mean, it's like, he said, wash and be clean. Why wouldn't you just do that? I mean, they said a mighty word. He said how to do it. Why are you so upset about that? He told you how. Just do it. So they prevail and they convince him. So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child. He was clean. Isn't that amazing? So clearly we see a reference to what church act? Baptism. I mean, we clearly see parallels to baptism in this, that by God's promise, this washing in the Jordan healed him when, other than the power of God, it would have brought no healing at all. So he goes down, and according to the word of the Lord, it is as God said. As God said, it was so, and it was good. That's how God works. And using the water as the means, very baptismal in that connection. And the restoration itself, you know, it's like, oh, and his leprosy went away. No, how complete was the healing?
Complete.
Was restored like the flesh of a little child. You're talking about a guy who was a warrior, you know, and he's of some age. You know, you're out in the desert, and you're talking about a guy who's got, you know, grizzled face and, you know, creased by the sun and leathery, and, you know, he's got scars probably from battles, or at least from, you know, calluses on his hands from walking, and he's a rough, tough old guy. And he goes and he washes, and not only does his leprosy go away, but his flesh is restored like the flesh of a little child. Smooth as a baby's butt. You know what I mean? I mean, it's not, God doesn't just make it a little bit okay. Baptism restores us completely, thoroughly. We are made new again. And isn't that an interesting parallel? The whole story began by the message of who? A little girl. And his flesh ends up becoming like that of a little child. You know, so there's a nice little parallelism there. It's good writing. It's good storytelling. It's good writing. It's very good writing. And he was clean. And clean, clean as in ritually and ceremonially acceptable again, too. He is clean, not unclean. So, God attached this promise to the Jordan and the washing of 7 times with his promise there for Naaman. Not everybody who washed in the Jordan that day 7 times was restored to the flesh of a little child. Go and wash in the Jordan now 7 times, you're not going to be restored to the flesh of a little child. God's promise was specific and clear and accomplished. God does make a promise with baptism that all water is a lavish washing away of sin, that it is for you and for your children and for all who are far off, that baptism does endure. And so with water and the Word, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, it accomplishes what he promises it to. It promises it will. So while this was a limited promise for Naaman and the curing of his skin disease, the promise of baptism by the word of the Lord extends always to everyone, everywhere. So people get hung up on, has anybody ever been to the Holy Land? So I know some people who've been to the Holy Land and they will bring back water from the Jordan or something like that. Or they want to get baptized in the Jordan River or something like that. And what's the issue with that? Why would they want that first off? Why would they want to get baptized with Jordan River water or in the Jordan River?
Well, I think it's special.
It's special, right? Oh, Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River. Oh, the Jordan River is in the Holy Land and those sorts of things, right? What's the problem with that, though?
It's not in the water.
Yeah, the water itself is not the special thing. It's the water and the Word. And so to elevate the element, to say, oh, this baptism is more special because of the water that it is, really places the created thing above the Word that makes it a baptism. It's not about the water that it is. It's about the Word that it's attached to. It can be rainwater from a puddle on the side of a car accident, which a friend of mine, a member of the church where I was at, came upon a car accident in the rain and baptized a person because they were in bad shape. Or it could be a little bottle of sterilized water in the NICU, which I've had to do. Or tap water from Valley City. That's what we have. We shouldn't place the element above the act and the word. It's not about the element. It's about, are we using the element that God has told us to use? Water. Okay, yes. Because baptism just means wash with water. That's why we use water. We don't use milk or coffee. Is there water in there?
Yes.
But is it a different element? Yes, it is. Yeah, so we should not get confused about those things either. So, yeah, so very baptismal in that respect, and let's see the effects. So he has a physical effect of his flesh being restored to that like of a little child. And let's see about the spiritual effect.
Pastor?
Yes.
His servants who came to him and told him to listen to the messenger,
Yeah.
are they Gentiles?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they had more
don't want to use the word faith, but they had more,
They have more sense, at least, to sort of say, look, you've come all this way. The guy who you came to see said to do this. Why would you ignore the whole purpose you're here? You know, I think that's more, whether they believe or not, is a little bit beside the point at this so far. But it's basically just saying, look, the guy who everybody says could do this has told you what to do. Why are you mad about it? Just do it. You know, he said this is how to do it, so why not?
It was a simple thing to do too. I mean, it's,
Right. Yeah. Who knows how much else he had spent on trying to be healed in other ways back home. Even. So then he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and he came and stood before him, and he said, Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth, but in Israel. So accept now a present from your servant. So not only does he have the physical change of being healed physically, but having been washed 7 times in the water by the word of the Lord, he comes out also what? Believing. I mean, if that's not baptismal, I don't know what is. I mean, what does baptism do for us? I mean, we go in sinfully reluctant and scoffing and sort of like, you know, how can water do such great things? And then God does it, and we come out as baptized children of God with the gift of faith in the Holy Spirit, and forgiveness of our sins, and cleansed so that our souls are like the flesh of a little child, you know, pure and remade and new again. I mean, he comes out from that baptism believing that there is no God in all the earth, but in Israel. I mean, he is converted to say Yahweh is the only God.
But just in Israel. Is that what he's saying?
No. There is no God in all the earth but in Israel, meaning the God of Israel is the true God.
Okay.
The God. So they would have thought in terms of gods having local governance, like the God of the Syrians, the God of the Israelites, the God of the Egyptians. You know, that's where they're located in that sense. But what he's saying here is the God of Israel is the only God in all the earth. His authority is universal. So the Israelites' God is the true God. Well, and I mean, Elisha's God is the true God. There's plenty of Israelites who are off the reservation, if you will, as far as who the real God is. They're worshiping Baal and all this stuff too in the northern kingdom. And so what does he want to do? For having been converted in this and having been healed, what does he now want to do? Accept now a present from your servant. He's thankful. He's thankful. It doesn't even seem like it's a payment per se. I mean, Elisha hasn't asked him for anything. But yeah, I mean, it's like when you have received a gift from the Lord.
it's like a free will offering.
Yeah, a free will offering. Yeah, I mean, a thank offering for what had been delivered here. But he said, and so now this is with Elisha now. Now they have met. So he returned to the man of God, and he and all his company came and stood before him. So we have Elisha now present. Having come through the baptism, he is now also in the presence of the man of God. No longer do we need access through the servant, but we have access ourselves to pray, right? So Elisha says, as the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. It's like, no, I'm not going to let you pay me for this. Which is probably a good thing, you know, because that way he can go back and say, you know, oh, you're healed. What did it cost? And he'd be like, you won't believe it. He wouldn't take anything for it. So otherwise it would be like, well, how much did it cost? It's like, well, I gave him all that stuff. It's like, okay, so, you know, because you paid, you were healed.
Yes.
No. This re-emphasized the free gift of grace that God bestowed upon Naaman. They just let him have it. Let him have it as a gift. Then Naaman said, well, if not, fine. If you won't take a gift, please let there be given to your servant 2 mule loads of earth. For from now on your servant will not offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god but the Lord. So it's a little strange. It may be a little bit of his paganness sort of creeping in there a little bit. What does he want? What does he want? He wants dirt from Israel, right, to take back to Syria, so that so he can build an altar on it, or he can kneel down on.
Like it's special.
Like it's special, yeah, that kind of idea. And
Tourists wanting to take home some
yeah, that kind of idea. So he sort of understands that, okay, this is the land of Yahweh, and if I want to worship Yahweh, do I need some of his land in order to do it? Or the concept of, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. He's like, well, I want to take some of this holy ground back with me to stay connected to it in some fashion. And I mean, it's a non-thing. It's not a thing. And I think that would sort of be a pagan way of thinking about it a little bit. To sort of say, oh, I need some of Yahweh's dirt in order to worship Yahweh. So, but I mean, Elisha doesn't say no. It's like, fine, if you want to take it, you can take it. Build an altar to the Lord and say, there's no God but Yahweh. Okay. But he has a problem. Verse 18. In this matter, what I'm about to explain to you, may the Lord pardon me, your servant. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon, so there's their god of Syria, Rimmon, their pagan god, to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter. And Elisha says to him, go in peace. So, because of his position as this commander of the army of Syria, he's the king's right-hand man, when the king goes into worship, some part of that ritual or whatever it is involves him having to walk with his king, and the king is going to bow down, and so he's going to get bowed down also. But he doesn't, he wants pardon for that, to say, I am not worshiping in doing that, but I have to do for my king, what is this thing? So forgive me for that when I have to go in and do this because of my position. Now, I might expect him to say, it's like, get a backbone and stand up and confess for Yahweh. Why don't you? But instead he says, no, just go in peace. Like, he doesn't even say, you are pardoned in this matter. It's sort of like it's not even a thing. No, don't worry about it. Which is a little strange. I think it's a little strange. But I think it might be along the lines of, like, think of like a bodyguard, think like a Secret Service agent has to go with somebody into a church that's not their religion, and they got to be there while this is all going on, even right next to the guy who's going through all his motions and things. It's like he's not there worshiping; he's just there doing a different job. And it's like, is him being present there by default worship of Rimmon? According to Elisha, no. Okay. So if you get permission directly from Elisha, if you want a way to work around something, if you get permission from Elisha, then you can go around it. But until you get permission from Elisha, you should not go and do pagan things, okay? Just so you know. So I think that's sort of an interesting little tie-up there at the end. So Naaman wants to give thanks to God for this, but Elisha says, no, the focus is going to be on the freeness of this gift. Naaman's faith is so fully converted that that he even knows to bow in the presence of another deity or another idol would be sinful. He's so converted to that he doesn't want to do it. He knows to ask for forgiveness for that in advance. He wants to offer sacrifice only to Yahweh. I mean, he is fully converted to this. And, we would also say that him and his household would probably be tied into this too. I mean, once the head of the household goes the household. So there's something to be said for that as well. A beautiful baptismal story about how God works through means and the message and the messengers, and just really beautiful. All for this pagan, all for this Gentile. And he's converted. So the whole idea that in the Old Testament God only cares about Israelites, it's false. I mean, here he's given Syria victories through Naaman. He has blessed Naaman now with faith in Yahweh, and he will probably go on to. He's like, all right, so how do I worship Yahweh, Elisha? Well, here's the Torah, here are the laws, here are the things. Here's how you worship Yahweh in spirit and truth. All right, that's what I want to do. Pretty awesome, pretty tremendous. But now we have Gehazi. So we have this sort of polarization. We have sort of this flip side now, where you have the man who was a Gentile and an outsider and an unbeliever converted to the ways of Yahweh, and now you have Gehazi, who was the servant of Elisha, who was the messenger of the messenger to bring the word of God to him. He is going to fall away. Like Naaman comes out of his pride, and Gehazi falls into his pride and greed at this point now. So Naaman goes a short distance away, and Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, "See, my master has spared this Naaman the Syrian." Like racist much? I mean, it's absolutely that tone of this Gentile, this Naaman, not accepting from his hand what he brought. As the Lord lives, careful. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him. So when Gehazi says, "As the Lord lives," what would we say that was?
Like he's not sure.
Swearing?
He's blasphemy. He committed blasphemy. He's using the Lord's name in vain right there. I swear to God that I'm going to do this, and it's like, nope. Don't call on Yahweh to do what He has not promised to do. Don't use the Lord's name in vain. So Gehazi is really falling into. He is resentful of God's graces. It's like the parable of the vineyard workers and things, and how the ones who work early and the ones who work late get the same amount, and the early ones are upset, and the master says, "Isn't it my money? I can do with what I want. What's it to you? Take what's yours." Gehazi is all upset because it's like, who is God to preserve this Gentile? Who does he think he is? Not good. This is not a good thing to say to God. So Gehazi followed Naaman, and when Naaman saw him coming, and someone running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him. He said, "Is everything okay? Is it all well?" He said, "All is well. My master has sent me to say," I'm telling a lie. I can tell he was lying. His pants were on fire. "There have just now come to me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothing." And Naaman said, "Be pleased to accept 2 talents. And so he urged them. He urged him and tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothing, and laid them on 2 of his servants, and they carried them before Gehazi. So he tells a lie, and he's like sort of being very deflective about it. He's like, no. He's not going to take it for himself. He didn't change his mind, but these 2 sons of the prophets, these 2 visitors have come, and we'd like to give them a blessing. We'd like to bless them with a gift. So can you give us a talent of silver for these guys, and a couple changes of clothing?" And Naaman said, "Hey, I'm not going to give you just 1 talent of silver. I'm going to give you 2 talents of silver, and 2 bags and 2 changes of clothing." He doubles it basically.
And sons of the prophets.
Yeah, so that phrase, "the sons of the prophets," has been like the language used for, I don't say like
And he's
monks
talking to a
exactly.
prophet here also.
Well, Gehazi is the servant of Elisha. We don't really get that Gehazi is the son of the prophets, but he is Elisha's servant and carries Elisha's word. And he's talking to Naaman. So Naaman's just overjoyed. It's like, sure, great. You know, I wanted to give you stuff. So now that you're going to let me give you stuff, I'm happy as a clam. Yeah, here, take it. I'll double it even. Go. I'm happy. And that's just the plain generosity of people who have received God's gifts. You know, I see it in so many of God's people here, that when we know the immensity of the gifts to which God has blessed us, through the forgiveness of sins and also material blessings He's cared for us during the day and in our lives, that to be generous with those gifts is just part of who we are. That generosity comes with it. So we see a faithful generosity in Naaman as well, not in the sense of wanting to pay for this, like he owes them anything, but he just wants to give this as a gift. He's just overjoyed with it. It's like, thanks be to God. Gehazi is lying to him, but Naaman doesn't know that. So he gives him his the two bags and two servants even to carry him for them. And when he came to the hill, he took them from their hand and put them in the house. And he sent the men away, and they departed. So he delivered it, and he packs it away. And he went and stood in before his master. And Elisha says to him, dun, dun, dun. So, where you been, Gehazi? He says, I didn't go anywhere. But he said to him, did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Like, I could tell that you were there. God had revealed this to me. Wasn't my heart there with you too? I knew in my spirit that this was your case. Was it a time to accept money and garments and olive orchards and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants? You know, was this the right time? We certainly received these things in the past for other things, but this was not one of those times. I had said no. Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever.
Oh, wow.
So he went out from his presence a leper, like snow.
Boy, he was
I mean, it hit him.
insightful, wasn't he?
Hard.
He was insightful. He knew.
Well, God had this was a prophetic revealing, you know, to Elisha that he knew that this was what had happened, and so he said, "Be not deceived. God is not mocked. The Lord sees what we do in secret, what we expect to be able to get away with, for God not to know is happening. He knows, and God knows." And reveals his knowing by his servant. He didn't just become a leper. It was proclaimed to him. And he was even given the opportunity, just like Adam and Eve. And it's like, where you been? Where?
Yeah, we know, didn't he?
So sort of that reversal then of, you have taken the place of Naaman in his pride, in his greed, in these things, in his focus on the things earthly that he had before his baptism, which also involved clinging to leprosy. And now that you've taken on all of his other greeds, now you will take on his leprosy as well. It is tough.
Slap in the face.
It is tough. He had misused the Lord's name. He had misused his own position. He had represented himself as bringing a word from God, from the prophet that was not spoken. I mean, so there's a message to preachers too. It's like, don't say, thus says the Lord, unless the Lord thus has said.
So did he then go down to the Jordan and?
I imagine, if I were him, I would have tried. I'd give it a shot. Why not?
It worked once?
Yeah, worked once. Why not give it a shot again? But
So he even lied about the two prophets' sons.
Oh yeah, that didn't happen.
I mean, they weren't there.
Yeah,
That
nobody
was-
had come to visit Elisha.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the story. That was the pretense to ask for the stuff. That was a lie. Elisha hadn't sent him.
Right.
Yeah. You've used his position of being able to be the one to speak for Elisha. Then he went and hid the money.
He just piled it up.
Yeah. And one sin always leads to all the others. One stacked upon another. And, he receives in manifestation, in physical manifestation, what had already, his heart was already as corrupt as a leper's skin. And so now his skin is likewise corrupted.
Now, all his descendants are gonna have that too.
Yeah, to you and your descendants forever. Yeah. Wow.
I can just imagine him coming home.
Yeah.
All of his kids, all that, nice going, Dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Something
Yeah,
to
the
keep
gener-
bestowed on the sons.
Yeah, the generational curse thing it's a hard thing to receive. Yeah, it's one of those things that I just thank God for his graces to, may he show love to 1,000 generations who love and keep his commandments too.
Now that's forever. I mean, for you and your descendants, forever.
Who, I mean, kick it down maybe 1 or 2 generations because nobody's going to marry him. Right, so it's a cutting off of his line, is what it is. Nobody's going to marry him. They're not going to reproduce after that generation. So it's a cutting off of his line, just like God had done to the false kings and the other pagans and things like that. So.
What is the phrase "sons of the prophets"? Were they weren't sons of Elisha?
No, they're not his like birth children, but these are like the students of the prophets in training, like a school of those who are devoted to the word and to caring for the prophet and these kind of things. And there were ones from whom God would sometimes pull prophetic events from. It's like the sons of the prophets came up to Elisha and was like, hey, your God's going to take your master away from you today, right? So they were given revelation as well. There's like the minor leagues, the training pool.
Like vicars.
Yeah, the seminarians.
Would
Yeah,
they be
this is
like
the-
disciples?
yeah, the disciples of the prophets. Yeah, they were with Elisha. Elisha was sitting before the sons of the prophets when they're having the meat stew and stuff like that. I mean, this is sort of, think of like a monastery or seminary, where there's training and study and these other things going on. So yeah. Well, it's 11:30. Time flies.
I have one question.
Yes.
They never mention anything about whatever happened to the young girl. I mean,
No, they don't. They don't. But I mean, Naaman goes back believing, and him and his household are now going to be sort of converted in that way. And so I imagine he's grateful to her. He's coming home and he's clean and his flesh is like that of a little child. I get to see her kind of being like, I told you.
Maybe he
The faith of a child.
her shepherd, so do you suppose you would have let her go back to her family?
I don't know.
I
Good
don't,
question.
I would say that's not his right to do so, because she's the slave of the king's wife.
No,
Oh,
it's
his wife.
Naaman's wife.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
yeah, he would have authority to do that, or
Yeah.
not. I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, she may not have anybody to go back to.
Okay.
Part of being captured in one of those raids might have been the death of her parents too.
that's true.
I was thinking, well, now that his whole family are going to be believers, that would encompass her
Yeah,
as well.
right.
That would just increase her faith.
Yeah, yeah. Or for her to to be that she was faithful in her service to them and to continue in that might still be the case. Yeah, I don't know if she would be released or not. Or like for him to say, well, now that I'm converted to Yahweh, am I going to see that maybe these things am I going to rectify things that I've done wrong in the past? Is that releasing her as part of that? I mean, taking people back in raids is not necessarily
A good thing.
a good thing. It's not necessarily bad thing either, though. I mean, she had been orphaned and things for her to take care of her now as a responsibility. Might be the best of any of the situations.
Maybe he would treat her more, not like a slave, or, but more of like
Yeah,
one
like
family.
Family.
Maybe, you know, maybe that relationship changed a little. I mean, we could only.
We could speculate.
Yeah.
It'd be nice.
Yeah.
But even those who are converted can still sometimes be sinful. We can still
No,
be.
we're also.
Oh, we're all students.
That's why we do.
So, I mean, you might still go back and not know how to treat her better and still treat her as a slave because that's what she is. You know, it's like, maybe not.
But she must have been treated fairly kind, because why would she have even said that, you know?
Yeah, she was okay with wanting him, yeah, but she actually desired that he would be
Yeah.
healed, not that he would, you know, yeah. You run away, you. Yeah. All right, we will see you, next week. We'll pick up chapter 6.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.